All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the February 2014 edition of BALLE's Local First webinar series focused on this year's Institute for Local Self-Reliance Independent Business Survey. My name is Martin Sorge and I serve as Program Manager here at BALLE. We have over 100 local economy leaders from across North America registered for today's webinar, and we're delighted to have you all with us. We'd like to give a huge thanks to our friends at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the Advocates for Independent Business for partnering with us on this webinar today. Thank you. Since many of you on the call are new to BALLE, I'd like to spend just a minute to tell you a little bit more about our organization. BALLE is the fastest growing network of values-aligned entrepreneurs, business networks, and local economy funders across North America. We are leveraging the collective voice of this movement to drive new investment, spread the best solutions, and harness the power of locally owned independent businesses to transform the communities where we work and live. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at @BeALocalist, where we'll be live tweeting this webinar. And like Jill on our team said in the chat window, feel free to put your Twitter handle in the chat window so that we can follow along with you during the webinar. And now a bit more about BALLE's Local First webinar series. This series features innovative strategies at the business and network levels that effectively make the case for local and result in more buying and thinking local first. We know that driving demand for local products and services is a critical piece in building the localist movement and taking Main Street mainstream. We suggest that you treat our webinars as an opportunity to bring together a group of business owners, social entrepreneurs, local government officials, policymakers, and network leaders in your community who are interested in the topic at hand. After listening to the webinar, you might spend an hour or so discussing with your group the applicability and relevance of this model in your community, and then come up with some next steps for action. We encourage roundtables, so we encourage you to gather a group of folks around the table to listen to the webinar together. Now I'd like to introduce the topic and speakers for today. For 7 years, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, in partnership with BALLE, the American Independent Business Association, and the Advocates for Independent Business, have surveyed businesses across North America to gauge how independent businesses are faring, to assess the impact of local business alliances and local first campaigns, and to identify some of the main challenges affecting independent businesses. ILSR senior researcher Stacy Mitchell joins us today to discuss the results of this year's independent business survey and to explain how you can use these results to build support for localism in your community. We also have Pederson with us from Local First Arizona to talk about how they've used this survey in their community. Stacy Mitchell directs the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's initiatives on independent business and community banking. An advisor to business groups, grassroots organizations, and policymakers, Stacy produces research and analysis and develops policies and innovative strategies to curb economic consolidation and strengthen community-rooted enterprise. Her articles have appeared in Business Week, The Nation, Grift, and many other publications. Her book, Big Box Swindle, was named one of the top 10 business books of 2007 by Booklist. Pederson is an Arizona native, an alumna of Arizona State University, and the communications director for Local First Arizona, which is a statewide nonprofit working to make Arizona a better place by supporting locally owned businesses and building vibrant communities that residents are proud to call home. Local First Arizona is also a BALLE champion member. During today's webinar, Stacy will present the results of this year's survey and some tips for using them locally, and Erica will talk about how Local First Arizona has used the results in their community. And finally, we'll end with 20 minutes or so for a moderated Q&A. Like Mikhail said, if you have any questions at all during the webinar, please type them into the public chat window. The presenters may answer the questions as they come up, but more likely we will catalog those questions and serve them up to both of the presenters during the Q&A period. And with that, I will pass this on to Stacy.
Great, thank you so much for that introduction. It's really, I'm so excited to be doing this, and I appreciate BALLE hosting this, and I'm so glad so many people were able to join today. As Martin said, this is a survey that we've been doing now. This is our 7th year in partnership with a lot of the folks that are on this call, and we really appreciate people coming together to make this really a huge national survey of independent businesses. What I want to do today is just run through some of the official results of the survey, but also sprinkle in a bit of our analysis, as well as some of the unofficial or unpublished findings of the survey. survey, and then talk a little bit about the impact and ways that we can use this information going forward as well. So just a little bit of the history of this survey. The idea of doing this survey grew really out of a couple of conversations concerning the fact that after the holidays every year in January, there was always this batch of media articles talking about how retailers fared over the holidays. And the stories were all about how national chains fared. How did Target do this year? How did JCPenney do this year? And so on. And out of a conversation I was having with some other independent business leaders, we thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity there to insert a story about independent businesses and independent retailers in particular. So we did the first survey in 2008, and at that time it was almost exclusively retailers that we were focused on, and we surveyed about a little over 1,300 independent retailers across the country. And we asked them how they did over the holidays, and we looked at the difference between those who were in cities that had some strong, buy local campaign versus those that were in cities without, a local first group or a buy local initiative. And this is, our headline from that first year: survey finds buy local campaigns boosted holiday spending at independent stores. As I said, this was a very small survey. I think it had maybe 5 questions. We thought, business owners don't have much time. We got to keep this short, and we just asked about holiday sales and buy local. Since then, we have continued to do it every year, and it has grown in terms of the participation, the numbers of businesses that are participating, but also the questions that we ask has expanded dramatically. We're now asking over 20 questions, a lot of them questions that have multiple parts. And of course, we're asking about sales over the entire year, as well as questions about challenges and policy issues and all kinds of things that we didn't used to ask. So this year, who we surveyed? We surveyed 2,600 independent businesses. About half were retailers and the other half were non-retailers. And the non-retailers were just about any kind of business you could imagine. I mean, we had contractors, we had small farms, we had service providers of all kinds, we had artisans. I mean, just about anything that you could name were in the non-retail half of the survey. Altogether, the businesses had over 30,000 employees. The average was about 11.5 employees per business. The median actually was 3, meaning that half of the businesses in our survey had fewer than 3 employees. So a lot of very small businesses included, and half of them had more than 3 employees. In terms of age, the average age of business was 13 years. We had quite a large segment of businesses that are very new, less than 5 years old. 21% of those that we surveyed were less than 5 years old. But we also had a pretty good segment of businesses that have been around for a long time. 10% of the businesses that we surveyed this year were over 50 years old, and in fact, 2% of them were more than a century old. And we surveyed businesses in all 50 states as well as the District of Columbia. And this is the map, actually, of where all the survey responses came from. You can see fairly well distributed across the population centers. We have a few in Canada. We get a few in Canada every year, but unfortunately have never had enough to be able to report findings for Canada. So we appreciate those businesses that do come in and hope one day that maybe we'll have enough representation north of the border. We also had some responses from Alaska and Hawaii, but those are not on this map. We do this survey with a lot of partners. These are just some of the national partners that help us get this survey out to independent business owners. And of course, we work with a lot of local first groups and independent business alliances as well, and really appreciate, this is what really makes the survey go, is the ability of local groups and national groups to get this out to their members and really encourage them to take it. So a couple of the unofficial findings, things that are not part of the report that we published, that I thought you might find of interest. One is that independent business owners are just absolutely refuse to be categorized. It always amazes me every year when we do this survey. You know, we had 2,600 responses this year, and a huge number of the responses when we ask, you know, what type of business are you, and we give people a big long list of choices. A huge number of them pick other, and they often then go on. We say, well, if you say other, please tell us what it is, and they'll type something out. They'll say, well, you know, I specialize in retailing modernist paintings. It's like, well, okay, you're an art gallery, but you know, inevitably, I think business owners, feel, and I think accurately so, that what they do is really unique, and it doesn't necessarily always fit into a category. But I'm amazed every year at just how many business owners say other. And then another unofficial finding is that independent business owners have a lot to say. And as I mentioned, when we started this survey, we were really nervous about asking more than just a small number of questions, because we thought, you know, gosh, business owners are really busy. Who's going to take the time to answer more than a few things? And what I have learned over the years is that, at least with regard to this survey, at least with regard to the kinds of questions we're asking, business owners are really eager to share their thoughts and their experiences, and even to the point where, you know, not only do we have them answering 20 plus questions, some with multiple parts, but we had over 500 business owners actually volunteer comments this year, you know, to type out, in some cases, multiple paragraphs elaborating on different aspects of the survey. And I read all of those comments and, you know, and compile them and pull out some of the information that comes through in those comments to include in the survey report. So in terms of the official results, this year we found that sales were up year over year, 5.3% on average. The median sales growth for business was 4%, meaning half of businesses actually had sales growth greater than 4%, which I think is pretty exciting to see. The share of businesses reporting that they were in the black this year, in terms of having seen, or I shouldn't say in the black, but having seen their sales grow in 2013 over 2012, was about 2/3, and it was down a little bit from 2012, but not much, a couple of points. And as you can see, the last 3 years have been significantly better than 2010, and I think when you begin to look back, you can kind of see where we turned a corner on the worst part of the recession. Among retailers, annual sales growth was smaller than for our sample overall. Among the retailers, year-over-year sales growth was 2.3%, and for the holidays, it was 1.4%. And that 1.4% is pretty much in line with what a lot of national chains did over the holidays. There's a great deal of variation. Some national chains did better than that. Some did a lot worse than that. And so independent retailers, I think, are holding their own fairly well. One thing I want to point out is that when we do this analysis, we're looking at what's commonly known in the retail industry as same-store sales. And that's a phrase you'll sometimes see in the business press. And what it means is that they're looking at sales growth at stores that have been open at least a year. So in the case of a national chain, what that means is that they're looking at the sales growth of stores that have been around at least a year, and they're not counting any of the sales that have come from new stores that chain has built during the previous year. So it's really, how well were the stores that you were already operating, how well did they do in the last year? And we do something similar to make our results comparable, which is that we ask businesses, did you have a big change in your business in the last year? Did you open another location? Did you substantially change your offerings? Any of those kinds of really significant change in location. If they say yes, then we don't include their results. So we really are looking at businesses that have been relatively stable year over year. What was the impact? What was their sales change? In terms of the impact of local first, one of the big sort of questions that we have to address whenever we do this survey is how do we decide which cities count as local first cities? We ask business owners, is there a public education campaign in your community around the idea of buy local? And businesses can then choose from a list of local first organizations, independent business alliances, or they can type in other and name some other campaign or organization that's doing this in their community. We then sift through all of those others and decide whether they actually count as local first cities, because what we're really looking for is, when we define that, is places that have year-round, very visible public education efforts, campaigns that are highlighting the benefits of choosing locally owned independent businesses. If a business says, my Chamber of Commerce does a little something around the holidays, we don't count that. And we were looking for, the kinds of substantial efforts that, many local first groups and independent business alliance are engaged in. We've found every year that we've done this survey, that businesses in cities with robust local first initiatives are outperforming those in cities without those initiatives. On the left here, you can see the year-over-year change in revenue in 2013. So businesses in cities with local first campaigns saw a 7% increase in sales versus 2.3% for those in cities without those initiatives. And on the right, you can see a similar breakdown for holiday sales just for retailers. We can't necessarily say that the local first campaign, that there's a causal relationship here. It's just simply a correlation. It could be that there are other aspects of these cities that both make them more likely to be places where local first campaigns start and more likely to be places where people are supportive of independent businesses. We don't necessarily know that the local first campaign caused this difference in sales. But it is noteworthy that we've found this every year, and much of the other data in the survey really goes along with the idea that local first is making a significant impact. Because the earlier surveys that we did were just for retailers, we only started asking questions of all businesses and looking at annual sales more recently, but the earlier ones were just for retailers. So I pulled this data just looking at holiday sales growth. And the blue line here are the businesses in local first cities, and the green line are businesses in cities without a local first campaigns. And you can see this consistency in terms of this gap in performance that has existed over all 7 years that we have done this survey. I think it's particularly noteworthy that the gap is biggest sort of in the years coming out of the recession, 2009, 10, 11, 12. I've certainly anecdotally heard a lot of business owners in my community say, if it weren't for Portland Buy Local, we would not have made it through this tough time. That really made the difference, because it raised this awareness, and people thought, I want to make sure we come out of the recession with businesses that I really care about, and in order to do that, I need to really support those businesses. We also ask a number of questions about the impact of local first initiatives, and what we find here, as you can see, is that 75% of businesses in cities with a local first campaign say it has had a positive impact, with 42% describing that impact as either significant or moderate. And we also ask, what specifically, how specifically has your business benefited from these campaigns? One of the things that I think is most interesting is the second line here. 59% of businesses in local first communities say it's brought new customers into their business. You think about the cost of acquiring a new customer. If you have to acquire customers through advertising or direct mail or something like that, it's expensive to acquire one new customer. And the idea that for the relatively low cost of being a member of an independent business alliance, you can generate an increase in customers, I think is a really significant data point. We also, of course, see increased local media coverage, more loyalty from existing customers, more awareness among city officials, more collaboration, all kinds of good benefits coming out of these campaigns. And I should say here that we do see some variation from one local first group to the next, and most of the time it has to do with how long that organization has been around. And we certainly see that groups that are more established have gotten bigger, done more programming. The level of impact that they're having is greater, in most cases. One of the new questions that we asked this year, and this was actually a question that Susan Miller on the BALLE staff suggested, was we asked them about the level of engagement. Are you a founding member of your local first organization? Do you promote it heavily? Are you just simply kind of listed in the campaign, but you don't really go out of your way to promote it? And then we grouped people and looked at how many of the respondents in each of those categories said that the campaign was having a significant or moderate positive impact on their business. And I guess not surprisingly, but nevertheless I think very interesting for all of you, is that we saw that those who participate more in the campaign, do more to market in their business, see significantly higher impact from the campaign. Those that are simply listed in the directory but don't do a lot to really promote it within their business don't get the same kind of benefits. And this is a question that we ask of all the business respondents, so not just those in local first cities. We ask everybody about whether public awareness has increased in the last year, public awareness of the benefits of supporting locally owned businesses. And we see in this case, this year, 62% of respondents said that it had in fact increased, 24% said it stayed the same. Businesses by local cities reported 67% of them said they saw an increase versus 55% in cities without campaigns. So we definitely see awareness seems to be growing faster in places that have local first initiatives, but that there's also just a degree to which the whole country is becoming more aware and mindful of the benefits of independent businesses. There are great quotes. These are all included in the survey report, so I'm not going to read them out here for you now, but we hear a kind of anecdotal evidence from survey respondents about the impact of local first and how it's helping their businesses and helping their communities. This year we asked about the challenges that business owners are facing. The question was, survey respondents were asked to rate how significant various challenges are to their business on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not challenging at all and 5 being extremely challenging. And the top challenge, by a wide margin, was competition from large internet companies. About half of all of the respondents said it was a 4 or a 5, so it was very or extremely challenging. And among the independent retailers, 69% rated this as a 4 or a 5. Just to put that in perspective, only 40% of retailers rated competition from large brick and mortar chains as a 4 or a 5. This is something that I think has changed over time. Clearly the impact of Amazon and other large internet retailers is being felt and is increasingly on the minds of business owners, and I think something that we all need to wrestle with in terms of how do we address this from a public education standpoint, from a programming and advocacy standpoint. In 2013, the challenge to compete with internet-only shops who offer below-cost goods became even more significant. We had a lot of comments like that from the business owners who took the survey. We asked particularly for the retailers, are you affected by the fact that large online retailers don't have to collect sales tax in many cases? And indeed, we had a large share of businesses say that this was having a negative impact on their sales. Here are all of the challenges that business owners were asked to rate. As I said, competition from large internet retailers came in first. My competitors have received better pricing and terms. The cost of health insurance, can't afford to market my business well. These were the top challenges among the list that we gave business owners to pick from. Some of the things you could also choose other, and some of the things that business owners mentioned, there were quite a lot this year who talked about escalating rents. That rents were rising very quickly, and often they didn't feel like they could keep up with the speed at which they were seeing, or the scale at which they were seeing those rent increases. We didn't ask anything about rent, so the fact that this was volunteered in a lot of comments, I think really points to the fact that this is a significant issue for a lot of business owners. Bad weather this year and the government shutdown were some of the other things that were mentioned specifically by quite a number of the respondents. Here's one thing I really want to highlight to you today. We found in asking business owners, did you look for a business loan in the last 2 years? We found that only a third of business owners had needed a business loan in the last 2 years. But we found that 42% of those who sought a loan either couldn't find a lender willing to lend it to them, or obtained less than the full amount that they needed. So this is an issue that affects certainly a minority of independent businesses, but it's an acute issue for those businesses because they're trying to expand in many cases and are unable to because of a lack of capital. And I think this really bodes poorly in terms of job creation and the economy overall. In the last segment of our survey this year, we asked about policy priorities. I'm actually going to skip. We have 2 charts in the final report. One is all of the respondents together, and one of them is just the retailers. They're relatively similar in terms of where the issues fall in the rankings, but I encourage you, if you're interested, to look later and you can sort of compare the two. But among the retailers, we really had these 3 issues kind of emerge at the top of the list, which all had to do with leveling the playing field. One was about extending, the top issue was about extending sales tax to online retailers. So that really goes hand in hand with the #1 challenge that was identified. Some of you may know there is a federal bill right now that would require large online retailers to collect sales taxes the way brick and mortar stores do. 40% of that was like the top pick among the independent retailers in terms of the policy changes they would most like to see. The second and third were eliminating public subsidies for big companies and capping credit card swipe fees. Again, really having to do with leveling the playing field. And as we move down, you can see some of the other kinds of policy issues and how they ranked. Again, I think I'm going to skip the quotes, but there's some juicy quotes, and these are again all in the report. So I encourage you to read them because I think they really express some of these issues quite well. So in terms of the policy priorities, as I said, when we look at the sample, either just the retailers or all of the respondents together, I think what you see, from the overwhelming majorities of business is that the #1 thing they really want is a level playing field. That they're sick of policies that tilt the playing field in favor of their big competitors, whether that's tax loopholes or subsidies or allowing credit card companies to really have a monopoly and gouge retailers. Those kinds of issues really go to the heart of what business owners want to see. We also looked at policy priorities among very new businesses, those that had started in the last, that were less than 5 years old. And they had a very different set of policy priorities that I think really reflect the concerns of businesses that are just starting out and whether or not the environment is really supporting new business development. And they talked about, these were their top priorities. They talked about bringing more development downtown, the idea that, if you're starting a new business, you want to have other activity around you. They talked a lot about small business loans. That was their second priority. More assistance for startups, and then removing the kinds of red tape that often make it difficult to start a new business. So I think when we think about policy issues, part of it for established businesses is this idea of the level playing field. And then for new entrepreneurs, there are also these particular issues that can either make it more or less difficult to start a new business. We also had an other choice here under policy priorities. About 11% of respondents didn't choose from our list. They wrote something else in, and these were the top things that they wrote in. One, coming back to that rent issue, that showed up a lot in policy priorities, where business owners were saying we need to find a way to address these rising rents. Government purchasing preferences that would favor local businesses, a lot about land use and transportation and how do we support the business districts that really where local businesses can thrive. And then lastly, minimum wage came up a lot. We didn't ask about it, but a lot of business owners volunteered comments. About 55% of those comments said we need to see the minimum wage go up so that people have more money to spend, so that the overall economy is better off, there's less poverty. 45% of the respondents who raised the minimum wage issue said, we're really concerned about this. We don't know how as a business we would absorb those costs if if minimum wages did go up. How frequently business owners lobby, we found that, excuse me, I lost my place here. We found that about half of business owners advocate on public policy issues either frequently or occasionally. I found that there were pretty dramatic differences just in playing around with the data, and again, this is not part of what we've published, but in playing around with the data, there were pretty dramatic differences in different sectors of the businesses on this, and a lot of it seemed to do with whether or not they belonged to an organization that was really encouraging them and providing resources to help them engage in public policy issues. So for example, among this, when I just looked at the bookstore owners who took the survey, it was a much higher number of them were advocating on policy issues occasionally or frequently. It was substantially higher than the average. And there, my guess is that it's because the American Booksellers Association provides a lot of tools and resources and encouragement for their members to go out and advocate on internet sales tax and other kinds of issues. And I found that was true for some other trade associations and other organizations when I broke out just their membership. And what that says to me is that there's a real opportunity here if we can provide guidance and tools that business owners will take advantage of those to speak up more often on some of these important public policy issues. Again, there's some great quotes in the report. I encourage you to take a look because I think they really flesh out. These are some quotes that talk about the need for a stronger voice for small businesses on policy issues, and I think really point to the fact that that we have an opportunity to really make local first not only a movement for consumers, but also something that we're really bringing to lawmakers. And just the last couple of things here. In terms of the survey impact, there are really three ways that I see this survey as having an impact. I mean, one, in terms of local first, is it's really documenting the impact and the outcomes and saying, hey, this is actually working, and we've got real evidence and data that's showing that this is making a difference for independent business owners. The second is that, ever since the very beginning, this has been a tool for getting our story in the media and getting the media to focus more on independent businesses, and that continues to be the case. We get a little bit of media coverage when we release the survey, but what we find mostly is that we get coverage throughout the whole year. So somebody who's writing a story about local first initiatives or independent businesses at some point during the year we'll often pull up and cite some of the results from the survey. In many years, we'll get over 100 news stories that reference the survey. And then lastly, in terms of our strategy, I think there's a lot in these surveys that can inform all of our work going forward in terms of the programming and research and education that we're doing. You can find this year's survey report and all of the past year's surveys at ilsr.org/surveys. Also, in the follow-up email for this webinar, which you'll get in a few days from BALLE, they will include a link to a folder that includes all of the graphs from this year's survey, as well as some Facebook graphs, images that you may wish to share on Facebook. You can also find those on our Facebook page. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of the questions, and I sort of want to pose some to you as well, and invite you all to email me at any point to provide answers to those, or share them today. But we're always interested in knowing what else we should be asking with this survey and how we should alter the questions. Are there ways to improve the existing questions? And in particular, we're thinking this year about being more deliberate about segmenting the survey. And so at the very beginning, we segment off retailers from other types of businesses, because that's part of the challenge in asking good questions, is that the kinds of questions we might want to ask a small farmer are very different from the kinds of questions we might want to ask a bookstore owner. And lastly, I'll note that we're thinking about doing a second survey during the year, which we would do in the fall, and would sort of preview some issues going into the holiday season, particularly for independent retailers. So thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it back. I guess I'm going to turn it over to Erica, who's going to share a little bit about how they've been using the survey in Arizona.
Thank you, Stacy. That was a great presentation. I know I always look forward to the survey every year. I'm kind of a data person. So I'll just talk a little bit about how we at Local First Arizona have used the survey results. And as Martin mentioned, we are a statewide organization based throughout the state in Arizona. We have over 2,400 local business members throughout all the different sectors throughout the state. And so we do a lot of work advocating for local businesses all throughout Arizona. So we've been able to use the survey results to our great benefit. First of all, we've been able to push the information out to our supporters, members, and followers. We found that our supporters love seeing positive information from us about the local movement in our state and across the country. They like seeing that what the work we're doing is actually having an impact. And also, people love numbers. We can tell people until we're blue in the face that supporting local businesses is good for the economy. But until we have those hard numbers like this survey provides, then we actually give them the reason of why it's important to support local businesses. And finally, we can use the survey results to show our members that our work in Arizona is actually making an impact. What we do is we actually purchase the individual Arizona results from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And we would recommend doing this because then you get a more personal idea of the impact of your own work. And we definitely push our members to participate in the survey. And we, I think, saw a threefold increase from last year in member participation this year. Second, we use the information privately with donors and also when applying for grants and funding. Again, providing those hard numbers are really influential in inspiring action and bringing money towards supporting our campaign when we can actually prove that the work that we're doing is having an impact. I'll also mention here that we share these specific challenge areas that are included in the survey with policymakers across the state to show them the certain areas that they should focus on to support local and independent businesses. And we also use the information internally to guide our programs. And finally, we also use the information to get press attention. If you want to click on that link there, you'll see an example of a press release we use for Buy Local Month, which is our annual campaign that falls between Black Friday and Christmas Eve. And it's our annual campaign for inspiring consumers to go local for the holidays. The holiday data that was in the survey fit very well into that. And it was picked up by, those are a few examples there of where that information was picked up. And it really helped us tell the story of how local businesses in areas with local first initiatives saw an increase in holiday sales over those without local first initiatives. So that was part of the story that we were trying to tell with that press release and Buy Local Month. And so finally, I'll close some tips. Again, I mentioned get the own personalized data for your specific area. It really helps a lot, but you can also use the national data as well. And if you're going to do that, make sure to push your members and the community to participate in the survey so that you have a good sample size. And then you just customize the data for your needs as you need them. For example, like we used in the Buy Local Month press release, there's really a lot of ways that you can use this information throughout the year to tell the independent business story. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Martin.
Great, thanks, Erica, and thanks, Stacy. Now we will start taking your questions, so feel free to, or I feel encouraged, rather, to put your questions there in the chat window, and I will serve them up to both Stacy and Erica. We already had some questions come in earlier, so Stacy, I wanted to start off with some kind of basic questions about the survey. First, I want to follow up on a bit of what Erica mentioned. Katya from Vancouver, I think, asked if there's a breakdown of stats by city. Can you talk a little bit about how that works with the survey?
Sure. We don't break down stats by city or state. We will provide localized results for your region if you're an independent business alliance or a local first group, and many groups requested that this year. And we share those with you privately, so it's up to you to decide whether you want to publish the results or not. We don't publish city by city or state by state breakdown, in part because we don't necessarily have an even sample. So we may, although we have quite broad geography in terms of, we've got all 50 states, and we've got, quite a large number of businesses overall. We have some states where we've got more businesses responding, relative to their population versus others where we don't have that many. And so it's always a little hard to tell whether the particular sample we might have from a state is really representative. And so we don't want to extrapolate too much from that. And the same is true for city by city.
Great. Erica asked if community banks were included in the survey. That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. We had, financial institutions, local financial institutions were one of the segments that responded. I don't off the top of my head remember about how many we had, but they were certainly part of the group of responses. And as I mentioned very quickly towards the end, one of the things I'm thinking about next year is, can we do a better job of segmenting so that we could ask a specific set of questions for community banks, for example, instead of trying to ask more generalized questions of everybody.
Great. And there are a couple other questions about the lending question that you asked small businesses. So for the businesses that could find lending, were there any questions that you asked about where they were able to get lending, community banks versus big banks versus credit unions?
We did not ask where they got a loan, and we didn't ask any more details about whether, how many places they applied, or, did you apply at a big bank or a community bank, and who turned you down. I think that's an interesting avenue of questions. I think the thing we struggle with every year is, how big can we let this survey get before people are gonna drop out and not complete it. So. Great.
And then, were there any specific services or programs that local first groups offered to the businesses that took the survey that they either mentioned or said that were most beneficial for them?
We don't ask about particular programs. We asked about the questions that I showed you in terms of the overall impact of the public education work and programming that local first groups do. When we break out local survey results for people, that does include any comments, and sometimes business owners may reference particular things, but we don't have enough information about the specific programming of local first groups to ask, I think, an intelligent question about that. And my suspicion also is that it's so variable that it would be hard to, ask a question of everybody that would really encompass, the right kinds of programs.
Great, thank you. And then, Erica, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that I know you guys work with a whole lot of local businesses. I don't know if you have any feedback for kind of what services and programs that folks who participate in your Local First campaign especially find most beneficial or ranked as most beneficial with you when you talk with your members there.
Sure, let me just take a peek at the results. I know many of our members, we provide a lot of different opportunities for our members. A lot of them rank our networking opportunities highly ranked. We offer monthly mixers throughout the state for our local business members to get together and kind of meet each other. Let's just looking at this, trying to find the results. But then we also provide educational seminars throughout. One of our most popular ones, we're having a webinar this week actually with our director, Kimber Lanning, about leveraging your localness. And it's just kind of an education to our members about how they can use their status as a local business to market themselves and promote themselves in the best way possible to their consumer base, and kind of talk to their consumers about the local business and kind of being an advocate for local first, just to in their own little sphere. But those are kind of the two big ones that we do that our members find most engaging. But then they also ranked highly for the Arizona results specifically was also the media attention that we get on local businesses. We do very well to draw the media towards local businesses when we can.
Great. Thanks, Erica. And a couple of folks asked a little bit more about where the increase in spending for the independent businesses was coming from. And so I was wondering, Stacy, if you can talk a little bit more about that, if you either have any more information on where those increases are coming from. For example, are more people shopping locally versus at, and then maybe decreases that correspond to that at the big box stores, if you have any idea where those increases are coming from.
Well, we do know that the increases that we've seen in the greater sales growth for the businesses in cities with local first initiatives, often those figures are outrunning the economy as a whole, so that they're seeing greater revenue growth than the economy is growing overall, or that retail sales are increasing overall in the case of retailers. So that's an interesting finding that suggests, that there is a displacement in the sense that there are, those are dollars that would have gone somewhere else that are going into independent businesses as a result. But that's that's sort of an educated kind of guess or thought about what's going on. As I noted, these are not, we can't establish causality with a survey like this. All we can say is that, businesses reported that they had a greater sales growth. The businesses that were in the local first cities, we don't know if that's a result of the local first campaign or some other factors, and we don't necessarily know, where those dollars are coming from. But as I said, the performance of businesses in local first cities is often not only outperforming their counterparts in non-local first cities, but are outperforming, the rest of the economy. And so, it does seem that there is. That on balance things are shifting in that direction. When we pair those numbers, I think, with both the questions that we ask about, are you seeing an impact on your business? Do you have new customers? Are existing customers more loyal? And those figures, which are quite strong in favor of local first. And we add in some of the anecdotal comments that are volunteered in the survey, where you have business owners saying, yeah, this has made a huge difference to my business, and often they'll tell a particular story or offer some additional detail about how it's impacted their business. I think when you put that all together, you get a picture, but this is, it's not to that level of kind of scientific detail to be able to answer that question precisely.
Great. And a couple of folks also asked about successful local first initiatives and what resources there are about that. So I know Eric asked, what are some cities with successful local first initiatives? I'll take a stab at that first. I would say check out BALLE's website. Many of our champion members and the BALLE Fellows run successful local first campaigns across North America. You can also visit the American Independent Business Alliance's website. Many of their members also have very successful local first initiatives. I think those are some great places to go. I'd start with Local First Arizona, where Erica's from, because they have one of the largest and I'd say most successful campaigns in the country. And then in terms of some specific resources about local first campaigns, I do want to point out that BALLE does have this ongoing local first webinar series, and we have webinar recordings from the past couple of years for some ideas around local first. We do offer a 100-page local first campaigns manual. I know that Amoeba also has a lot of local first materials, and there are my source for all of the best studies on local first is from Stacy Mitchell and the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's great website. But I was wondering if either Erica or Stacy have any other tips for resources on starting local first campaigns or working, having great local first campaigns other than the ones I mentioned.
Well, I can just mention a couple of the things that are on our site. I mean, I think the how-to kinds of guidance on how do you start these things and how to, what makes them successful, really comes from the resources that Martin outlined, both at BALLE and Amoeba, and then also from, some of the more established local first organizations and looking at what they're doing. ILSR on our website, we have a lot of the data on what is the impact of locally owned businesses. What are the empirical studies that show locally owned businesses are better for your economy, for your community, for the environment. We have a lot of that kind of information cataloged. So when you're looking for kind of the substance of the argument, we can help fill in some of that, as well as a lot of analysis of what some of the policy issues and some of the challenges that business owners face. One of the questions in the chat was about where's some more data on the lending issue. We have some pages on a community banking section of our site, and we have a lot of data there that connects the dots, showing how it's locally owned banks are the primary source of loans for locally owned businesses, and really filling in and providing the data on that and sort of showing why fixing this lending problem that small businesses are facing really has to do with strengthening community banks to a large extent. So I encourage people to take advantage of some of those resources as well.
Yeah, I think that you guys touched on everything. I'll just mention that our director, Kimber Lanning, has, I believe, mentored a few people who are interested in starting organizations in different areas of the country. And so we're always open to talking to anyone who's interested and just talking about our experiences.
Great. And at BALLE, we also, for our members, we try to be the place where we can bring people together to discuss these issues. So one of our goals is to connect folks working in this movement. And we have a lot of folks working on local first campaigns, so it's a great kind of virtual space to talk about this stuff. And kind of as we finish up here, Stacy, I wondered if you wanted to just do a quick mention of the kind of new coalition you're working with, the Advocates for Independent Business.
Yes. So this year we published the survey under the banner of the Advocates for Independent Business because almost all of our partners, at least at the national level, in getting this survey out are part of this new coalition. This is a coalition of organizations that represent independent businesses. I think our membership is up to 11 or 12 organizations. And many of these are trade associations, so it's the American Booksellers Association, the American Specialty Toy Retailing Association, the National Bicycle Dealers Association, a variety of those kinds of trade associations that represent a particular sector of independent businesses. BALLE is also a member, Amoeba is a member, and the goals of this coalition are to share information and programming to help all of these organizations better serve their members and ensure that local businesses continue to thrive. And then two, and in many respects a more significant goal, is to create a voice for independent businesses on public policy issues. And right now the coalition is really focused on three issues. One is extending the requirement to collect sales tax to large internet retailers. We're doing a lobbying day in March in DC with members of Congress, where we're bringing in a lot of local business owners to talk to their representatives on that issue, eliminating subsidies for large corporations, leveling the playing field, and then access to capital is the other big issue that we're focused on. This coalition got off the ground about halfway through 2013. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance helps coordinate its work, and they have a website, so you can go find them, Advocates for Independent Business, and I encourage you to take a look at that and learn more about the group.
Great. Well, thank you, Stacy. I'm going to start to wrap things up here. I want to, again, give a huge thank you to both Stacy Mitchell and Erica Pederson for presenting today, and an extra thanks to Stacy for putting together this great survey every year. It's super helpful for all of these organizations working on localism throughout North America. So just a big round of applause for Stacy for leading that every year. It's so helpful, and we really appreciate all your work on that. I wanted to just talk about a couple of things that BALLE has related to our conversation today. We talked a lot about businesses who are needing access to capital, and oftentimes getting capital through traditional mechanisms such as banks can be difficult, especially in this economy. And last week, BALLE released our Community Capital Toolkit, which is a great collection of resources aimed at redirecting local financial resources to local businesses and projects that serve their communities. This toolkit includes a 20-page introduction to the idea of community capital and innovative ways that you can get local money working in your community, 7 free webinar recordings, and the access to our Community Capital Library, which is a list of related articles, organizations, and other reading in community capital. So I encourage all of you to check out our guide to community capital, and I encourage all of you to join us in Oakland, California this June 11th through the 13th for our annual BALLE conference. This year our theme is Prosperity for All. And this year's conference will cover, two of the big areas that this year's conference will cover is one, community capital, like I just mentioned, but also a big through line of this conference will be public policies that support locally owned independent businesses. As this survey underscores, that's a really important issue for business owners across the country. And so we've devoted one track of this conference to talking about public policy. And Stacy will be a big part of that conversation. So we hope to see a lot of you there, June 11th through the 13th in Oakland, California. Registration is open, and if you register by March 3rd, you'll get the best rates of the year. So please visit our website, localist.org/conference, for information about this year's BALLE conference. It's going to be a really great one, and I hope to see a lot of you there. And then if you want to keep the conversation going, as I mentioned, become a part of the Localist learning community. For more information on how you can join BALLE, please visit our website at bealocalist.org/join. This is a great place to connect with your peers working in the same field on the local living economies movement. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And again, watch out for link to the call audio, the presentation materials, and a copy of questions from the chat window. You'll see an email from Mikel Davila over the next few days with all of that information. You can also purchase past webinar recordings at our website, bealocalist.org. And again, shortly after this call, you will receive an email with a link to a short survey about this webinar. We really encourage you to take that survey so that we can use it to improve our webinars and hear from all of you about suggestions for topics that you would like to see coming from BALLE's webinars. Again, I want to finish up with giving a huge thank you to Stacy Mitchell and Erica Pederson for presenting today, and for all of you for joining us today. I hope to see all of you again soon. Thanks, everyone.